Hello, and welcome to what is going to be a special episode of Between Two Psychs. The reason being is that we've had a leak, Mike, an S.E.N.D leak. The white paper apparently has been leaked, and it's all over the news. So we thought we would do a little bit of a coverage on it. And there's roughly about 6 main points that come out of it, but we'll take them in one at a time. And, we don't know what this leak actually means. We don't know what the legislation is going to look like, and we don't know what the new code of practice is going to say. So this is, for all intents and purposes, a speculative episode. We are trying to fit the pieces as best we can based on the information that's out. But the first thing that comes out, Mike, is that EHCPs are going to be reserved for just the most complex cases. We're moving to a tiered system away from the binary system that we currently have for those with special needs. What do you think of that? Good news or bad news?
Is it new news?
They have been talking about it for a while. There's that document, I can't remember who, Dane, somebody wrote that thing saying that it needs to move to a tiered system.
Were you working on the old statements era, or are you only...
I came in just as that went out.
So we used to have, before the EHCPs, stage 1 to 5, which was a tiered system. And, once a child was at stage 3 and wasn't responding to intervention, the stage 4 was all about the preparation for the statement, and then stage 5 itself was the statutory assessment. So when I say, is it new news, I'm just wondering, what are we actually going into?
It's if you stay around long enough, the same thing comes. It's like the same bus comes around again, doesn't it?
It can do. What are you saying?
And as I suppose, I don't know. Well, I can't even say it's because you're grey, because my beard's looking terrible these days. But you were there whenever it was the tiered system before under the new Labour government. Did it work? Is the question.
What a question. I mean, the whole sort of statutory end of the system is the question, does it work, isn't it? Whether it was the old statement and the staged approach there, whether it's the new HCP system, whether it's the system that's coming our way. You and I and the majority of people listening to this are favouring inclusion. So is it favouring inclusion? Is it doing what we actually want it to do? Is the partnership working actually in place that the EHCP wanted to be in place? So I think in terms of the new system, will it promote you and I working with health staff and social care staff? Will it promote the family and teachers' integration into that multi-operation working? I hope so.
I hope so too. The devil's in the detail, isn't it?
Yeah.
Because, personally, I've worked education and social care. I haven't stepped into the NHS or the health sector too much. Obviously, I've worked with professionals in that sector, but I myself haven't gone into hospitals to work, so to speak. And what I have learned over the years is the on-the-ground professionals are always willing for the multi-professional agency stuff. And there's frameworks. My research is based on developing those frameworks that allow that collaboration to take place. However, the devil is in the details, how systems are funded, how they're structured, who is accountable to who. These things matter, because this is where we allow the frontline staff to actually work with each other to get that professional collaboration out there. And at the moment, I don't see how that's going to take effect without a very, very in-depth look at those three systems: social care, education, and health.
Yeah.
The management structures are too diverse for them. For example, social care and health supervision is standard, but it's not standard in education. We've spoken a lot about that over the episodes. The next thing they talk about is the reassessment at key transition points, and they make an issue at particularly 11. I find it interesting that they brought up 11, because it made me think we do that already almost as standard. If a child's at the beginning of year 6 or towards the end of year 5, and we think the transition to secondary school is going to be tricky for them, you do tend to find yourself doing a lot of statutory assessments around that age group. However, the way it was worded in the documents I've read, obviously it's a leak, so you can't take it for fact, is that it sounded like they were going to remove funding at this point. Now, I hope that that's just speculation, but it makes me wonder, what is the lay of the land going to be around that key transition stage?
Yeah, it does, doesn't it? And, the sort of subsequent questions of what's going on in the thinking that makes people suggest we'll review the impact of an EHCP at the year 6 age to see if it's required for the year 7 onward age. So what are we going to be expecting to do as schools and families and professions? What do we need to be thinking about ahead of that? So will we start looking at children sort of year 2, year 3 with a view of they will be leaving primary school at some point? What are we focusing on in terms of actions? What are we focusing on in terms of interventions? What are we focusing on in terms of outcomes? I don't like the idea of this being the spotlight, but the flip side of the spotlight is, will it sharpen up those of us who are writing outcomes and the provisions? Will it sharpen up the delivery of the support plan to children? I don't know.
You hope it does. You're talking about the actual writing of the support plan, but it also makes me wonder, will it sharpen up the review process? Because the EHCP review process is supposed to be built in, but I can't remember the last time I was invited to a review meeting, and usually it's because the system's so overwhelmed. And I wonder if are they thinking about putting in more of a formalized review system that actually looks at the outcomes in more depth, and, what does that challenge educational journey? That's the optimistic side of me. The skeptical side is this about funding issues at the moment? Because we know that LAs are massively in debt and that the government is going to take on that debt at some stage in the future. We don't know. We just don't know at this stage, do we?
And I'm putting myself into the support system in Key Stage 3 and above, and wondering what on earth does that say to people in that sector? There's a lot of pressure being afforded to the Key Stage 3 upwards just by that insinuation from the leak. We need to make sure that all stages and all phases of education are supported and are equally supported, or we start to think about what sort of challenges are being faced in secondary that aren't being faced at primary. A lot of things coming out from this leak, Adam, that we've already covered and probably will cover in future episodes. But it's it could very, very challenging to the secondary system.
It could be very challenging, and we know that, like you just said, the Key Stage 3's aspect is, there's almost like a big microscope over it at the moment. And it's something needs to happen there, because it is where a lot of children, we know the exclusion rate goes up around that stage. So the focus for me, anyone who follows me on LinkedIn will know that I'm always talking about relationships in Key Stage 3 and how vital that is to the long-term outcomes for children in general, not just those with S.E.N.D.
I follow you, Adam, on LinkedIn, and all you do is repost my stuff.
That's because that's after you've reposted my stuff.
Anyway, next point on the league.
Next point is the funding. The focus of funding is shifted to schools and away from LAs. I am not entirely sure if this is a good thing or a bad thing. It might allow more agility for schools, but also it might remove some of the focus that LAs have been able to do around project-based work. And I'm thinking virtual schools have a big influence, that they do a lot of good work. I'm not entirely sure what that's going to bring. If schools are able to work in a more multi-agency way at the ground level, that might be a good thing, but are they going to have the support and framework, and how do you identify when that that is needed.
Yeah, absolutely, Adam. I was thinking the same. I mean, if the sun shone brightly on this situation, you would imagine that the school would be able to bring in you, say an OT, a speech and language therapist, for example, and sit at the table to be able to talk about a child in particular, and the funding would be there to do it. And equally, with the sun shining brightly, there would be enough ed psychs to approach. There'd be enough OTs and enough speech therapists to approach. So just, yeah, keep my fingers crossed that the sun shines brightly on that one.
Yeah, me too. This is an optimistic one, and one I really hope they deliver on, is a push towards mainstream inclusion. One of the key things they mention is that they're going to push for more resource bases in mainstream schools.
Yeah.
And I hope that what I don't want is what I've seen in some secondary schools in particular, is where the resource base is where those children spend all their time. I would like to see that resource base has an outreach program, in the sense that it upskills all staff on how to teach S.E.N.D. What we cannot fall into with this next piece of legislation is that you have your S.E.N.D teachers and your mainstream teachers.
Yeah.
A good teacher can teach S.E.N.D.
Yeah.
And that is vital for the survival of the profession, I feel. And the long-term outcomes of children, essentially, is that you need to be able to teach S.E.N.D, because that is such a valuable skill set.
Yeah. It's pointing towards, I think, the exactly as you say, the integration. And I would hope, that, I mean, the special schools and staff within special schools and specialist provisions are amazing. I've always enjoyed working with them. And I think the knowledge base that those teachers have is fantastic. I'd love to see, like you just said, really, about the sharing of knowledge coming from those specialist schools. So I see great work around outreach teams who are basically the staff from the specialist schools going into mainstream schools to increase skills and experience. And I personally would love to see our profession as ed psych moving towards more of an empowerment model, and schools believing that you don't need the old assessment model. We need a consultation model, because the consultation model is about empowerment. It's about sharing psychology and therefore insights and understanding into the children, which is far more effective than doing assessments and reports.
Assessments and reports, they have their place, but they cannot be the core to the work. It has to be the consultative side. And in my own practice, as you know, any chance I get, I'm talking about the work I do with my schools. And they completely buy into the consultative model now. And they see the impact it has, the impact on their own well-being to begin with, and the well-being of the children as a result. Yeah. And that... that just takes a different mindset, and we have to get back to that point. Psychologists are not just assessors. We are allies to our teaching professionals.
Yeah. So I think, Adam, that merger, if we can get there, of, ourselves, the specialist staff, the staff from health, it would become a strong early intervention model.
It would.
The sun needs to shine.
It would. I would pray for the day that we can get back to where it's regular for me to sit in a room with a pediatrician and hash out what needs to happen for a child, and really look at it in detail. I can't remember the last time I was in the same room with a pediatrician. The next one is the early intervention. So we just touched on that. That we know early intervention is the best way to support students. That's why so much resource is put in the early years. Although it has been scaled back in the last 15 years, but we just know that has. And for me, I think shout out their speech and language allies, in the sense that they do a lot of good work in the early intervention stages, and it really has such a profound impact throughout the entire educational journey.
There's got to be, just on that, Adam, there's got to be feet on the ground with that, because otherwise it becomes political, vote grabbing speaking. Early inclusion, early intervention. And I remember sitting at a senior table in the local authority, and somebody very senior said, we've got to increase inclusion. And my question was, well, what are you going to do? What are you going to do with your team this was a very senior member of staff with a lot of staff underneath them. What are you going to do to get that? You can't just keep walking around saying we've got to increase inclusion. And it's the same with this early intervention. We can't just keep walking around saying early intervention is the answer. We've got to put boots on the ground, and that's going to take a lot of investment.
Yeah, absolutely. 100% agree. Because you can already see some head teachers going, oh, they're going to expect me to identify these things early on. And it's completely outside their professional remit, or their professional experience. So you're absolutely right. Boots on the ground, more supportive professionals, more of a team around the school.
Yeah.
I know we have team around the child already, but team around the school.
That's a great phrase.
Get that support in place and get teachers back in their position where they feel supported rather
100%.
than just expected to deliver and be that hub. So it's a short episode today, Mike. Like I said at the top of the episode, we don't actually know what this legislation is going to look like at this stage, but these are some of the things that have come out, and these are our thoughts on it. We will probably be wrong on a few of them, but we try to get both sides of the coin as best we can.
I don't think we did a bad shout considering it's only a leak. Thanks, Adam.
Cheers, Mike. See you later.
Cheers.